Ooh. Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you all. In the next 18 minutes, it's my privilege, as well as awesome responsibility, to share with you a little bit about what Brian sort of touched on. Several thoughts come to mind that I want to begin with, and one of which is appreciating that this is perhaps the first time that some of you have met me and will hear the story. And so I thought it would be important then to sort of give you a very rapid and very, very rapid sort of journey as to why core change came to being. But there are a couple of other thoughts, three thoughts that I want to share with you. One of which is a reminder that the history of mankind is the history of achieving the impossible. John Gardner also said that we have before us some of the greatest opportunities brilliantly disguised as insoluble problems. And then the third is something that I shared with Kat, who was sitting at my table yesterday. And the question that we were asked about is, what is our greatest fear? My greatest fear, I will admit to you, is that I will die before realizing the potential of core change and bringing about profound change to a growing proportion of our population. It's my hope then, as a result of this presentation, that you'll prove me wrong in that regard. So I want to begin then again, like I said, what brought me to sort of develop core change. And we'll talk a little bit about really what core change is. As the director of the trauma program at Cincinnati, I witnessed something that I thought was unbelievable and what I realized was unconscionable, and that is an exponential increase in the number of children being killed by gunshot wounds in what, when I was recruited, was the most livable city, or at least that's what I was told. This has actually increased despite then the efforts of many folks. Solutions that you will see that are addressing the symptoms are not really having an outcome, and if anything, are actually resulting in opposite the intended circumstances. Children are some of the largest proportions of individuals then being shot and killed and perpetrating the violence. And the average age, when I started core change, of children coming into this institution that I viewed as one of the most powerful in dealing with the health and illness of children was 12.9. This child is a 4-year-old, 2 blocks away from Children's Hospital that was shot, paralyzed in his leg. He wets his pants now when he hears a car backfire. His mother says that he's not willing to go out and play. He sits and watches TV. A perfect recipe then for not only post-traumatic stress. Those who are abused or shot will also tend to be abusers, and also a recipe for obesity because they sit in their rooms and munching on food that they cannot obtain, and so it's typically junk food. But this is also what I see. This is a 14-year-old with a gunshot wound so devastating that we couldn't close the abdomen. This child did live, but this child's injuries, physical injuries, were healed, but the emotional injuries, unknown and unknowable, are still things that he struggles with, as well as his family. Cincinnati is in the center of a perfect storm. Not only is it violence, but we also see evidence of infant mortality, highest in the state. You can see there very quickly that there is a spatial clustering, and one of the common things about the spatial clustering is that these are communities of concentrated extreme poverty. As a matter of fact, a recent study by our Department of Health showed that depending on what neighborhood you lived in, that there was a 20-year life expectancy difference. Now, this is in the most affluent and most literate country in the world. Martin Luther King said that of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane. This is Cincinnati. So this led me then to try to understand further, how is it that despite literally billions of dollars since I've been there have been spent, that we have such disparities in health, such disparities in social well-being? That led me to sort of seek out advice from those who are smarter than me. And if there's anything that you'll see about core change, it's bringing together not just tools, methodologies, and approaches that in other venues have been shown to bring about profound change and extraordinary civic collaboration, but to bring minds that are much smarter than us, and to understand that collectively those diverse disciplines then can actually bring about the change that we all truly aspire. Peter Block introduced me to Peter Senge. Peter Senge then invited me to the first Systems Thinking in Action presentation in Indianapolis. And as a result of that sort of early introduction, it was clear to me that our current level of thinking was not only getting us anywhere, it was getting us in the opposite direction. It led me to systems thinking. And the belief that systems thinking in action can actually bring about the change, could save lives, can improve well-being, can improve competitiveness. Of interest is that in 1969, the father of systems dynamics recognized that the most pressing crisis facing this nation was the crisis in the inner city. And he proposed modeling to see what the solutions are and how things that we might think because of ideology or partisanship may actually make things a lot worse. This is in 1969. In 2014, things are actually worse than what they were in 1969. As a matter of fact, the data would suggest that a baby born to a single mother in 1936 has a better outcome than that baby born to a single mother today. We're not moving in the right direction. And what we are experiencing in Cincinnati is something that virtually every urban core is experiencing today. But it's invisible to many of us. People are marginalized. As Brian witnessed with one of the tours, they are segregated. It brought to mind then almost a slave colony in some areas of Cincinnati. Past solutions resulted in fixes that failed. Today we have with us Rebecca, and she and Christina were helpful in sort of developing, at my request, a visualization tool to help others to see what I've seen, that what we're currently doing is not only not working, but again, having opposite the intended effect. And with this visualization tool, I was able to influence others that we're not going to do anything by feeding the hungry or clothing the naked, but we needed to get to the root cause, and we needed to have everybody in the city, all stakeholders, young and old, rich and poor, to understand what is the root cause, and to then believe that we can co-create solutions to address those root causes. It's getting people to understand that it's not a black thing, even though black-on-black crime you'll see in the media. It's informing the systems model with evidence, exploiting that evidence and yet exploring further how we can co-create solutions that are right now unknown or unimaginable. This is a study by Rob Sampson, one of our advisors, who demonstrated clearly that it's the correlation of concentrated poverty and violence, and that this correlation is something not just with Chicago, but also with Stockholm, Sweden. You couldn't think of a more homogeneous white population. That the degree of poverty that we're seeing in the United States and in Cincinnati and other urban cores is orders of a magnitude greater than other communities. And furthermore, that this poverty not only affects the old, but actually has lifelong consequences on the young. This is a study from the medical school that I went to at the University of Pennsylvania that demonstrates that a child born to a mother of concentrated poverty, okay, that effect of poverty is actually worse than being born to a mother as addicted with crack cocaine as far as the effects on brain development. This is a study I can't get out of my mind. I hope you can get it out of your mind. And that this poverty in the neighborhood, concentrated neighborhood, has lifelong consequences, that a child born in an impoverished, extreme poverty neighborhood as an adult, 70% of them will be living in that same extreme concentrated poverty neighborhood. But if that's not bad enough, more recent evidence tells us that Cincinnati is actually only one of 2 cities that have actually gone in the reverse direction as a result of the recovery from the recession. I love these complex, insoluble problems. Now, people would say, well, it's, we shouldn't be killing each other. Well, this is a study that was shared with me on a course, one of the most popular courses at Harvard Medical School, Moral Basis of Murder. It really helps to understand the rational basis for irrational behavior. People who are hungry, have no place to eat, will do things that we may seem irrational, but actually, in their minds, their meaning-making, decision-making is actually quite rational. This study was a study by Philip Morris that actually decided, in order for the increase in profits, that they would, despite the deaths that would occur as a result of increasing smoking in a particular country, that it was in their best interest to do that because of the profits and the money saved. This is another study that may resonate with folks because of what's happening now with GMC. It's the Ford Pinto. And Ford decided, knowing that there were deaths as a result of the Ford car not being repaired because of the rear crashes that would then the car would blow up in flames, decided that they would not then announce it, and instead looked at the cost-benefit ratio and decided that it was more profitable to just let 180 people die and an additional 180 people then be seriously injured. So Core Change then has the bold vision of bringing health, peace, and prosperity for all children of all species, for all generations, by transforming those most challenged neighborhoods into learning organizations. Learning organizations where the stakeholders themselves, the people living there, have the capacities to create their future and not dependency. And we decided first then to understand what structure and culture, how they interplay. And we decided to look at structure and how we could look at the market base to help address the concentrated poverty in these communities. We took an integrated community wealth approach so that wealth then could be advanced not only for the individual, but also for the community. And the reason that's important is that that individual then must see that the community is a place where they can stay and live and not do what I did as a poor kid in Harlem and get the hell out of there, because that only further perpetuated the poverty. And so one of several hundreds that we have in vision, businesses, that is successful right now, and you'll hear more about from my colleagues, is Waterfields. It's located in the urban core, cooperatively fashioned, so that it'll be an incentive to take these entrepreneurs that are doing a great job getting money selling drugs, to look at how they can make money to not only bring themselves self-actualization and self-esteem, but also promote well-being and wealth in their community. That's Waterfields, and you're going to hear more about that. We understand, though, that there's one particular barrier that I think jeopardizes the success of this wonderful, profitable business model, and that is the culture. In fact, of the two, I think culture is perhaps the most daunting. Because when you've been subjugated for 244 years, still with segregation, perhaps not as legal segregation, but still internalized, that's a challenge. The current reality is that people feel that they are not worth anything, and they look for their worth in multi-partner fertility. They're told still by such pundits as Charles Murray that you're inferior. There's a street smarts and a culture that helps to sort of save your life while you're in that neighborhood, but doesn't do well as far as getting back into social mainstream. The vision of Core Change then is, how do we then go beyond systems thinking and actually take the other disciplines to help transform that culture in a way that the great possibilities of a business in that urban core could actually realize that individual and community wealth, that we can transform that organization, that people can learn and have these capacities to create the future that they truly aspire. In the words of Martin Luther King, work that improves the condition of mankind, that brings security for its own sake, a state of society where want is abolished. Work of this sort should be enormously increased, and we are likely to find that the problems of housing and education, instead of preceding the elimination of poverty, will themselves be affected if poverty is first abolished. Poverty, my friends, my brothers and sisters, has to be first and foremost the objective of transforming our urban core. What we do in Cincinnati, we can then share with other cities. But we will not be able to transform that urban ecology unless we deal with the culture. And that is no easy task. Mitch Morris, one of my street workers, sent me this text a couple of weeks ago. In the first 3 months of this year, we've had 22 homicides. 19 of them are youth. Remember that picture that I showed you with that abdomen open? This one was about a 14-year-old girl that died in my emergency room, shot in the heart, chest. This I find unsettling, particularly when I get a letter like this from a mother. Dear Dr. Garcia, next year will be 20 years since you saved Vanessa's life. My, how time has flown by. This is my reality. I can save a life. I can save lives. With this work of core change, I can save more lives than I can save in my career as a surgeon in the operating room. But I can't do it alone.